You were never addicted to them. You were addicted to the feeling of finally being chosen. That is the part nobody talks about. People think empaths stay too long because they are weak. They think empaths stay because they are desperate, because they have low standards, because they do not know when to walk away. But that is rarely the truth. The truth is much darker than that. Empaths do not stay because they enjoy pain. They stay because they see things other people miss. They see sadness hidden behind anger. They see loneliness hiding beneath distance. They see fear hiding behind cold behavior. They see wounds hiding beneath silence. And when you spend your whole life seeing pain inside people, leaving becomes difficult, because every time someone hurts you, your mind creates a story. Maybe they are just stressed. Maybe they had a difficult childhood. Maybe they are scared of intimacy. Maybe they do love me and just do not know how to show it. Maybe if I become more patient, things will change. Maybe if I love them better, things will finally become different. And slowly, something dangerous begins to happen. You stop asking whether someone is good for you. You start asking how much more pain you can tolerate before they become the person you hope they can be. That is where many empaths lose themselves, because they are not falling in love with reality anymore. They are falling in love with potential, and potential is one of the most dangerous drugs in relationships, because potential whispers promises. Potential says stay a little longer. Potential says wait one more month. Potential says they are changing. Potential says do not give up now. Potential says your patience will eventually be rewarded. And the frightening part is that sometimes you actually see small changes. A good day, a sweet message, an apology, a moment of affection, a few hours where they become the person you wanted them to be. And suddenly hope returns. Suddenly you think, maybe this time is different, maybe now everything will finally work. But what many people do not understand is that emotionally painful relationships do not survive because of happiness. They survive because of inconsistency, because your brain starts chasing the next emotional reward. You stop feeling calm, you stop feeling safe, you stop feeling secure. Instead, you begin living emotionally hungry, waiting, watching, analyzing, overthinking. You replay conversations inside your head while driving. You reread messages before sleeping. You wonder if you said something wrong. You wonder if you asked for too much. You wonder why someone who says they love you can also make you feel invisible. And eventually something strange begins happening. You stop noticing how much pain you are carrying because pain slowly becomes normal. You become used to confusion, used to disappointment, used to uncertainty, used to emotional exhaustion. You tell yourself relationships are difficult. You tell yourself nobody is perfect. You tell yourself love requires sacrifice. But deep down, something inside you begins whispering a different truth. Something feels wrong, because real love does not constantly make you question your worth. Real love does not make you feel lonely while sitting next to someone. Real love does not make you beg for consistency. Real love does not make you feel like earning affection is a full-time job. And maybe right now, some part of you already knows that. Maybe right now you are thinking about someone you fought for, someone you defended, someone you understood even when they never understood you, someone you gave chance after chance after chance, because empaths do not leave after the first wound. They stay, they explain, they forgive, they wait, they hope, until one day something inside them becomes tired. Not angry, not hateful, just tired. And that is where the story truly begins. You tell yourself you are staying because you love them. But if you look deeper, really deeper, you may discover something uncomfortable. Love is not the only thing keeping you there. Sometimes it is fear. Fear of losing someone you invested years into. Fear of starting over. Fear that maybe you will never find another connection like this again. Fear that maybe you are asking for too much. Fear that maybe if you leave, you are giving up too early. This is the pain loop. Many empaths never realize they are trapped inside, because pain does not always arrive looking like pain. Sometimes pain arrives looking like hope. Sometimes pain arrives looking like loyalty. Sometimes pain arrives looking like patience. And that is exactly why it becomes dangerous. At first you think you are simply being understanding. You tell yourself, everyone has flaws, everyone has wounds, everyone deserves patience. And that is true. But there is a difference between understanding someone's pain and becoming responsible for fixing it. There is a difference between loving someone and carrying them emotionally while abandoning yourself. Many empaths never notice the moment that line gets crossed because it happens slowly, almost invisibly. One day you are helping them through a difficult moment, then you are helping them through another difficult moment, then another, then another. Eventually you wake up and realize the relationship feels like work. You become the emotional caretaker, you become the peacemaker, you become the therapist, you become the one who apologizes first, even when you were hurt. You become the one who sends the message first after every argument. You become the one trying to hold everything together while the other person simply shows up whenever it feels convenient. And because empaths naturally feel deeply, they often convince themselves that giving more will eventually create balance. So they give more time, more patience, more understanding, more chances, more emotional energy. But here is what nobody warns you about. The more you overgive, the more invisible your own needs can become. Because when you spend all your attention studying someone else's emotions, you slowly stop listening to your own. You stop asking simple questions. Am I happy? Do I feel safe? Do I feel valued? Do I feel emotionally seen? Instead, your mind becomes obsessed with another set of questions. Are they okay? Are they upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Why are they distant today? Why do they feel different? Why are they pulling away again? And without realizing it, your emotional world starts revolving around another person's behavior. Their mood becomes your mood. Their attention becomes your peace. Their distance becomes your anxiety. Their approval becomes your emotional oxygen. This is where the trap becomes powerful. Because now you are no longer simply loving someone. You are emotionally depending on moments of relief. You become addicted to the return of warmth after coldness, addicted to the relief after confusion, addicted to tiny moments of affection after long periods of emotional uncertainty. And your brain begins learning a dangerous pattern. It begins associating emotional inconsistency with love. So when calm, healthy love eventually appears, it feels strange. It feels boring. It feels unfamiliar because chaos became familiar. Pain became familiar. Emotional hunger became familiar. And the most dangerous part of all is that many empaths do not realize they are drowning until they are already exhausted because they were too busy trying to save someone else. There is something many empaths never understand until years later. They think they keep choosing the wrong people. They think they simply have bad luck in relationships. They think they are cursed to attract emotionally unavailable people over and over again. But what if the problem is not luck? What if there is a pattern hiding underneath everything? Because emotionally unavailable people rarely walk into a room announcing who they are. They rarely say, I am going to drain you emotionally. I am going to disappear when things become serious. I am going to make you feel close one day and distant the next. It never begins that way. It usually begins with intensity, strong connection, deep conversations, eye contact that feels different, words that make you feel seen. And for a moment, it feels almost magical. You feel understood. You feel chosen. You feel like finally someone sees the parts of you nobody else noticed. And for empaths, this feeling can become powerful because many empaths secretly carry a wound they do not even recognize. They spent years becoming the person who understands everyone else, years becoming the listener, years becoming the helper, years becoming emotionally available for everyone around them. But deep inside, many of them quietly ask one question: who understands me? Who notices me? Who stays for me? And when someone arrives creating the illusion of that feeling, the empath becomes vulnerable. Not because they are weak, because they're human, because everyone wants to feel emotionally chosen. But here is where the pattern begins becoming dangerous. Emotionally unavailable people often create emotional closeness quickly, then slowly begin pulling away. And when they pull away, something activates inside many empaths. Suddenly the relationship no longer feels like love, it feels like a mission. Now they want answers, now they want to fix the distance. Now they want to restore the connection that existed before. They start remembering how warm the person was in the beginning. They start thinking maybe stress changed them, maybe fear changed them, maybe something happened. And instead of asking whether the relationship still feels healthy, they begin chasing the feeling they had at the beginning. But the beginning was never the full picture. The beginning was only one moment, one version, one emotional snapshot. And many empaths spend months or even years trying to bring that version back, trying harder, loving harder, giving harder, hoping harder, not realizing something painful. You cannot love someone into emotional availability. You cannot heal distance by sacrificing yourself. You cannot force consistency from someone who only gives connection when it feels convenient, because healthy relationships do not require constant emotional rescue missions. Healthy relationships do not require you to become smaller just to keep someone comfortable. Healthy relationships do not force you to prove your worth every single day. But when you have spent years earning love through effort, peace starts feeling unfamiliar. And this is why many empaths accidentally stay trapped. Not because they love pain, but because pain feels familiar. And what feels familiar often feels like home, even when it hurts. At some point, the damage begins changing you in ways you do not notice immediately. That is the frightening thing about emotional exhaustion. It rarely arrives all at once. It enters quietly, slowly, almost invisibly. You do not wake up one morning suddenly feeling broken. You wake up feeling slightly more tired than yesterday, slightly more distant than last month, slightly less excited than before. And because the changes feel small, you ignore them. You tell yourself you are simply stressed. You tell yourself work has been difficult. You tell yourself life has been overwhelming lately. But deep inside, something else is happening, something far more serious. You are beginning to disappear from your own life, because emotional pain has a strange way of changing people. It does not only hurt your heart, it changes the way you think, it changes the way you see yourself, it changes the way you move through the world. Suddenly you overanalyze every text message. You notice changes in tone that other people would never notice. You become sensitive to small shifts in energy. You start reading between every line, looking for signs, looking for proof, looking for danger. And you tell yourself you are simply paying attention, but you are not paying attention anymore. You are surviving. Because when someone repeatedly hurts you emotionally, your nervous system starts learning something. It starts believing safety can disappear at any moment. So now your mind stays alert, watching, scanning, preparing, trying to protect you from future pain. And eventually this becomes exhausting because you can never fully relax. Even during good moments, some part of you stays afraid. Some part of you waits for the distance to return. Some part of you waits for the cold behavior to come back. Some part of you waits for the next disappointment. You start becoming suspicious of happiness itself because happiness never lasted before. You become afraid of feeling secure because security always disappeared. You become afraid of trusting because trust always hurt you eventually. And that is where emotional damage becomes dangerous, because now you are no longer reacting only to the present. You are reacting to old wounds too. The person sitting in front of you may not even be hurting you at that moment, but your body remembers previous pain. Your body remembers waiting for messages that never came. Your body remembers crying alone after pretending everything was okay. Your body remembers feeling abandoned while trying desperately to hold someone close. And memories like these do not simply disappear because time passes, they stay hidden underneath the surface, quietly shaping the way you love and the way you protect yourself. This is why some empaths eventually become unrecognizable, even to themselves. The person who used to trust easily becomes cautious. The person who used to speak openly becomes quiet. The person who used to believe the best in everyone becomes guarded. And people around them often misunderstand what happened. They say you changed. They say you became cold. They say you became distant. But they do not understand something important. You did not become colder because you stopped caring. You became quieter because caring started hurting too much. And there is a huge difference between those two things. The hardest battle an empath fights is usually not with another person. It happens inside their own mind, because there comes a moment where two voices begin pulling them in opposite directions. One voice comes from the heart, the other comes from survival. And these two voices rarely agree with each other. The heart says, stay patient. The heart says, they are hurting too. The heart says, nobody is perfect. The heart says, maybe they just need more love. Maybe they need more understanding. Maybe they need more time. But another voice quietly begins speaking underneath all of that, a voice that has been ignored for a very long time, a voice that says, something does not feel safe anymore, a voice that says you are becoming exhausted, a voice that says you are disappearing, a voice that says you cannot keep carrying this alone. At first, the empath usually ignores that voice because ignoring themselves has become normal. They spent so much time understanding everyone else's emotions that they forgot how to listen to their own pain. They became experts at reading other people while becoming strangers to themselves. So they continue giving, continue waiting, continue hoping. But eventually the body starts saying what the mouth refuses to say. Suddenly sleep becomes difficult. Suddenly small things become overwhelming. Suddenly they feel emotionally tired even after doing nothing. Suddenly they feel anxious for reasons they cannot explain. Suddenly they feel heavy all the time. And they think something is wrong with them. They think maybe they became too emotional. Maybe they became too sensitive. Maybe they are asking for too much. But what if they are not asking for too much at all? What if they have simply been surviving on too little? Too little consistency, too little honesty, too little effort, too little emotional safety, too little reciprocity. Because people can survive without many things for a while, but nobody survives long without feeling emotionally safe. And eventually the internal war becomes impossible to ignore, because the heart keeps saying stay while the nervous system keeps screaming leave. The heart keeps remembering beautiful moments while the body keeps remembering painful ones. The heart keeps replaying who that person could become while reality keeps showing who they already are. And that conflict slowly tears people apart, because living in emotional contradiction is exhausting. Loving someone while hurting because of them is exhausting. Missing someone who keeps disappointing you is exhausting. Wanting closeness while fearing pain is exhausting. Wanting to stay while secretly wanting to run is exhausting. And maybe this is why many empaths look strong on the outside while silently falling apart on the inside. People see them smiling. People see them functioning. People see them showing up every day. But nobody sees the war happening underneath. Nobody sees the nights spent overthinking. Nobody sees the emotional exhaustion. Nobody sees how much energy it takes just to pretend everything feels normal. And eventually something inside begins asking a question that changes everything. What if staying is hurting me more than leaving ever could? And once that question appears, the entire relationship begins changing forever. The breaking point rarely looks the way people expect. Most people imagine breaking points as screaming matches, doors slamming, angry words, tears, chaos. They imagine one explosive moment where everything finally falls apart. But for many empaths, it happens very differently. It happens quietly, almost peacefully. One day they simply wake up and realize they are tired in a way sleep cannot fix. Not physically tired, emotionally tired. Tired of explaining themselves. Tired of being misunderstood. tired of carrying conversations, tired of begging for effort, tired of asking for things that should never require begging in the first place. Because after surviving emotional storms for so long, something inside them slowly stops fighting. And that moment confuses people around them because from the outside, nothing dramatic happened. There was no huge argument, no betrayal discovered at midnight, no final explosion. Yet suddenly the empath becomes different. Suddenly they stop sending long messages trying to fix things. Suddenly they stop chasing after distance. Suddenly they stop reopening conversations after every conflict. Suddenly they stop asking why someone changed. And people panic because they mistake silence for indifference. But silence is not always indifference. Sometimes silence is exhaustion reaching its limit. Because before an empath leaves physically, they usually leave emotionally first. They grieve the relationship while they are still inside it. They mourn someone who is still standing in front of them. They cry over a future they secretly know is disappearing. They begin accepting truths they spent months trying to deny. And the painful part is that nobody notices this process happening. People only notice the final moment. They only notice the distance. They only notice the coldness. They only notice the absence of effort. They do not notice the hundreds of moments that created it. They do not notice every disappointment that slowly removed another piece of trust, every ignored feeling, every broken promise, every lonely night, every moment where the empath felt unseen while giving everything they had, because nobody breaks from one wound. People break from wounds repeated over and over until survival becomes stronger than attachment. And eventually, something changes inside the empath forever. They stop asking themselves how to save the relationship and start asking themselves a different question. What am I losing by staying here? And that question changes everything because now the focus shifts. Now it is no longer about fixing another person. Now it becomes about protecting themselves. For the first time, they begin seeing something clearly. They realize love should not require self-betrayal. They realize loyalty should not require emotional self-destruction. They realize understanding another person's pain does not mean abandoning their own. And suddenly the person who once tolerated everything starts tolerating nothing. The person who once waited starts walking away. The person who once gave endless chances closes the door quietly. And people call this coldness, but it was never coldness. It was survival finally becoming louder than pain. And this is where the transformation begins. Not the kind of transformation people post online with perfect quotes and beautiful captions. The real kind, the painful kind. The kind nobody claps for because it happens in silence. Because after everything an empath goes through, after all the overthinking, all the waiting, all the emotional exhaustion, all the nights spent questioning themselves, something eventually shifts. For the first time, they stop asking why someone else would not love them correctly. They begin asking why they kept abandoning themselves. And that question changes everything, because for years they believed love meant sacrifice. They believed love meant staying through everything. They believed love meant understanding pain no matter what it cost them. They believed loyalty meant enduring suffering. But eventually life teaches them a painful truth. Love and self-destruction were never supposed to mean the same thing. Love was never supposed to require you to disappear. Love was never supposed to demand pieces of your identity as payment. Love was never supposed to make you feel emotionally homeless inside your own heart. And suddenly, old patterns start becoming visible. They start seeing every moment they ignored their intuition, every time their body felt unsafe while their mind kept making excuses, every time they accepted less than they deserved because they were afraid of losing someone. Every time they called emotional chaos passion, every time they confused inconsistency with love. And instead of feeling anger toward others, many empaths experience something much more painful. They feel grief. Grief for the version of themselves that kept begging for crumbs while offering feasts. Grief for the person they became while trying to keep someone else close. Grief for all the energy they poured into people who never planned to hold them carefully. But grief does something strange. If you stay with it long enough, it eventually begins creating clarity, because clarity arrives when the noise finally stops. And Once that clarity appears, an empath begins understanding something powerful. They understand that being chosen by someone else was never the answer. Being understood by someone else was never the answer. Being loved by someone else was never the answer either. Because none of those things matter if they come at the cost of losing yourself. And suddenly their standards change, not because they became cold, not because they became difficult, not because they became selfish. They change because they finally understand their own value. They stop chasing people who create confusion. They stop fighting for people who only give effort when they are about to leave. They stop shrinking themselves just to fit inside someone's emotional limitations. And for the first time in a very long time, they begin feeling something unfamiliar. Peace. Real peace. Not the temporary peace that comes after finally receiving a message back. Not the relief that comes after someone stops pulling away for a few days. Real peace. The kind that does not require suffering first. The kind that does not require earning love through pain. And maybe that is the final truth nobody tells empaths. The goal was never finding someone to complete you. The goal was remembering who you were before you started abandoning yourself for everyone else.